in a quiet roadside town where folks still waved to each other and the diner lights never went out. There was a man behind the stove no one really knew. They called him Silent Joe. He wasn't mute, just quiet. Always the first to arrive. Always the last to leave. He cooked without fuss, cleaned without complaint, and never spoke a word, not to the waitresses, not to the customers, not even a simple hello. Teenagers cracked jokes behind his back. Regulars shrugged him off, as cold or odd, but he kept flipping pancakes, stirring soups, keeping to himself like a man carrying something heavy no one else could see. Most folks dismissed him until, one morning, a young soldier walked in, caught a glimpse of a faded tattoo on Joe's wrist, and froze. It wasn't just ink, it was a ranger tab, and in that moment, the entire diner would learn who Silent Joe really was. Joe was always the first one through the door. Long before the sun touched the faded curtains of the diner, he was there, unlocking the back door, switching on the lights, tying his apron in the dim glow of morning. He moved like clockwork, every motion practiced, deliberate, silent. No one had ever heard him complain. No one had ever heard him laugh either. The man just cooked. Locals called him Silent Joe, a nickname that stuck over the years like grease on a well-used griddle. He didn't answer to it, just nodded if someone spoke to him. Sometimes not even that. The younger waitresses, new to the place, used to try their luck with him. "Good morning, Joe," they'd chirp. No response, not rude, just empty. Like there was a wall between him and the rest of the world. People talked, they always do. Some thought he'd lost his voice, in a fire. Others whispered about prison time, or heartbreak, or some trauma too big for words. Most folks didn't care to ask. After all, the man could cook. And in a town like theirs, that was enough. Teenagers joked about him. It became a sort of mourning ritual. In the summer, a group of them would come in, order greasy plates of eggs and bacon, and toss a few jabs toward the kitchen. "Hey Joe, you allergic to talking or just too pretty to ruin it?" They'd laugh, clinking their soda glasses, and mimicking his blank stare. Joe never reacted. His face never changed. He just flipped another pancake, sprinkled parsley on another plate, and slid it across the pass like nothing had happened. But everything changed one Tuesday morning. It was just past 7. The early crowd had come and gone, mostly truckers, farmers, and retirees who liked their eggs before the day got too hot. The booths near the window were still filled with the smell of toast and strong black coffee. Joe stood at his usual station, working the skillet. When the bell over the front door jingled, a young man stepped inside. His uniform was fresh, boots polished, hair trimmed tight. Not many soldiers passed through town these days. The older folks noticed him immediately. You could tell he was newly minted, barely into his 20s, still holding himself like he was afraid of taking up too much space. He sat at the counter and ordered a simple breakfast, eggs over easy, bacon, hash, browns, and coffee. Nothing special. The waitress called it back, and Joe got to work. A few minutes later, he placed the plate on the counter himself. The young soldier reached out to take it, but something stopped him mid-motion. His eyes locked onto Joe's wrist, just below the rolled-up sleeve, partly faded with time and age, was a tattoo. It wasn't flashy or large, just a small emblem, a scroll with bold letters. Anyone in the military would recognize it instantly. The Ranger tab. The young man's posture shifted. He stood up straighter, shoulders squared. The casual hunger in his eyes gave way to something deeper: respect, curiosity, maybe a bit of awe. He looked Joe square in the face and asked, "Carefully, sir, were you with the 75th? Joe paused. He didn't nod, didn't smile. He just stared at the soldier for a second, as if measuring the weight of the question. Then, in a voice rough from years of disuse, he spoke a single word. Mosul. Silence swept the diner. The waitress stopped mid-step. One of the teenagers at the corner booth dropped his fork. Even the old man reading the paper lowered it slowly. The soldier, without hesitation, stood and saluted. Joe didn't return the gesture. He didn't need to. He just held the young man's gaze for a moment longer, then turned back to the grill. As if nothing had happened. Whispers started within minutes. The waitress who'd worked there the longest leaned over and whispered to the others. I knew he was someone. I always knew. Within the hour, folks started piecing it together. Someone made a call. Another checked online. And just like that, Silent Joe had a name. Staff Sergeant Joseph Whitman, Army Ranger, 3 tours in Iraq. 1 in Afghanistan, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and a discharge after an IED attack outside Mosul left half his unit dead. He came back, broken not in body, but in spirit. He never returned to his hometown. No interviews, no speeches. Just a quiet job in a quiet diner. Somewhere he could disappear. People saw him differently after that. The teenagers stopped their jokes. One of them even came up quietly and said, "I'm sorry, sir." Joe didn't respond, but he didn't have to. Veterans from nearby towns began to stop by. Some would nod from the doorway. Others would leave a coin or a patch on the counter. No one stayed long. Joe never said much, but he started offering a nod, a quiet acknowledgement from one soldier to another. A small American flag appeared, one morning, pinned to the wall behind the pass. No one claimed to have put it there, but no one took it down. It stayed. And every time Joe handed out a plate, it fluttered just slightly behind him. In the weeks that followed, business didn't change much. Joe still cooked, still cleaned, still kept his silence, but the air around him shifted. He wasn't just the quiet guy behind the grill anymore. He was something more, something lasting. Not every hero wants a parade. Some just want a stove, a quiet kitchen, and the peace that comes from doing something well. In his silence, Joe said more than most men ever could. After that morning, the diner changed quietly, but unmistakably. The teenagers who used to laugh at Joe now sat in silence when he passed by. The old-timers, once indifferent, began greeting him with a subtle nod of respect. No one asked him questions. No one tried to pry. But they all watched him differently now, as if seeing him for the first time. It wasn't just the revelation that he'd served, it was how he carried it. With no medals on his chest, no stories to tell, no need for recognition. Joe came in, each day the same way he always had, through the back door, before the sun rose, apron tied neatly, hands already working. He didn't speak more than before. In fact, he still hadn't said another word since that moment with the young soldier, and no one expected him to. Veterans from nearby towns began stopping by. Some wore caps with unit patches, others came in plain clothes, but their eyes told the story. They didn't linger. They just left coins or unit pins on the counter, silent gestures from men who understood what Joe had given and what he had chosen to keep to himself. One morning, a family came in, a father, mother, and a little boy no older than 8. The boy clutched a folded piece of paper and asked if he could give it to the man in the kitchen. It was a crayon drawing of the American flag, with the words, "Thank you for protecting us." Joe didn't say anything, but he took the drawing, placed it gently on the shelf above the grill, and gave the boy a soft pat on the head. That piece of paper stayed up there, untouched. Long after the crayons had begun to fade, someone hung a small American flag near the kitchen doorway. No one admitted to doing it, but no one ever took it down. It fluttered slightly every time. Joe walked past with a fresh plate. Customers began to notice that he handled the food with even more care, each plate wiped clean at the edge, each portion just right, as if his silence now carried a deeper sense of purpose. The jokes had stopped. Yes, but something more important had started. A quiet reverence settled over the diner, the kind you don't force or announce. It was in the way people spoke in lower voices, in the way they cleared their own tables when they could, in the way even the cook's silence was met with gentle gratitude. Joe had become a symbol, but not in the way heroes usually are. He never stood in front of a crowd. He never shared his past. He simply showed up every day, put his head down and worked. And somehow that was enough. More than enough. Not every man who serves comes home with a story he wants to tell. Some bring back memories they'd rather leave buried. Joe didn't need a stage. He just needed a stove, a steady rhythm, and a town willing to let him be. What changed that day wasn't Joe, it was everyone else. They realized that some heroes don't wear their honors on their chest. They wear them on their skin, in faded ink and old scars. They speak through action, not words. And sometimes they simply flip pancakes with steady hands while carrying ghosts no one else can see. In his silence, Joe gave his town something it didn't know it was missing: a quiet kind of courage. The kind that doesn't seek attention. The kind that simply endures. And day after day, plate after plate, he reminded them, respect isn't earned through stories told, but through the life quietly lived after the story ends. If this story moved you, if you believe that real heroes don't always need to speak, hit the like button. Click subscribe for more powerful stories about ordinary people who carry extraordinary legacies, and share this with someone who still believes in quiet courage. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Sergeant Whitman.